The evacuation sirens screamed across Colony Station Meridian as Captain Sarah Chun watched the last of the alien council ships disappear into the swirling darkness beyond the station's viewport. Her hands gripped the command console so tightly her knuckles had gone white, but she couldn't let go. If she did, she might collapse entirely. "They're really leaving us," whispered Lieutenant Rodriguez from behind her, his voice barely audible over the wailing alarms. "After everything we've done for them, they're actually abandoning us here." Sarah forced herself to turn away from the viewport where the Zephyrian battlecruisers had vanished just moments before. Around her, the bridge of their cobbled-together command center buzzed with frantic activity as her crew tried to make sense of what had just happened. 23,000 human colonists, engineers, soldiers, and civilians had just been sentenced to death by their supposed allies in the Galactic Confederation. "Status report," she called out, her voice steady despite the chaos in her heart. Years of military training had taught her to compartmentalize, to focus on the immediate problem rather than the crushing weight of betrayal. Chief Engineer Marcus Webb looked up from his console, sweat beading on his dark forehead. "The quantum storms are intensifying, Captain. Our shields are holding for now, but at this rate, we've got maybe 72 hours before they start tearing the station apart." The Zephyrians took their shield generators with them when they pulled out. Sarah nodded grimly. The dead zone had earned its name honestly. This region of space, located at the intersection of three unstable quantum fields, was a graveyard of ships and stations that had been caught in the perpetual storms of twisted space-time. The only reason Colony Station Meridian had survived here for the past 8 years was because of the advanced Zephyrian shield technology that had protected them while they worked to establish humanity's first permanent research outpost in this sector. "What about the other species' contingents?" Sarah asked, though she already suspected the answer. "Gone," reported Communications Officer Janet Park, her Asian features tight with anger. "The Caltharians pulled out 6 hours ago. The Nexri left this morning. We're the only ones left." The irony wasn't lost on Sarah. Humanity had volunteered for this assignment, had pushed harder than any other species to establish a presence in the dead zone. The Galactic Confederation had been skeptical at first, but humans had a reputation for thriving in hostile environments. Where other species saw only danger and death, humans saw opportunity and challenge. For 8 years, they had proven themselves right. The research station had uncovered revolutionary discoveries about quantum mechanics, space-time manipulation, and exotic matter that had advanced galactic science by decades. Human ingenuity, combined with their stubborn refusal to give up, had turned the dead zone into one of the most productive research facilities in known space. But that was before the Devourers arrived. The Devourers were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They weren't a species in any conventional sense, but rather a collective consciousness that consumed matter and energy on a scale that defied comprehension. They had emerged from the galactic core 6 months ago, sweeping outward in all directions, leaving nothing but empty space in their wake. Every attempt to communicate with them had failed. Every military engagement had ended in catastrophic defeat. World after world had simply vanished, consumed by the advancing tide of destruction. The Galactic Confederation's combined fleets had managed to slow their advance in some sectors, but it was becoming clear that this was a war they couldn't win through conventional means. That's when someone in the Confederation's high command had come up with a desperate plan. The Dead Zone, with its quantum storms and spatial anomalies, might serve as a natural barrier against the Devourers. If they could find a way to destabilize the region's quantum fields at just the right moment, they might be able to create an impassable wall of chaotic space-time that would stop the Devourers' advance. The plan required someone to stay behind and manually trigger the destabilization sequence when the Devourers arrived. Someone expendable. "Captain," called out Dr. Elizabeth Vasquez from the science station, her usually calm voice tinged with excitement. "I'm reading something strange on the long-range sensors. The quantum storms, they're not just random anymore. There's a pattern emerging." Sarah moved to look over the scientist's shoulder at the data scrolling across her screen. Dr. Vasquez had been the lead researcher on the quantum mechanics project, and if anyone could make sense of the chaos surrounding them, it was her. "What kind of pattern?" Sarah asked. "It's subtle, but it's there. The storm cycles are beginning to synchronize across multiple dimensional layers. If my calculations are correct, we're looking at a cascade effect that could artificially stabilize large portions of the dead zone within the next 72 hours. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Stabilize it how? Think of it like a three-dimensional whirlpool that suddenly stops spinning. All that rotational energy has to go somewhere. In this case, it would create pockets of normal space-time scattered throughout the region, connected by stable quantum tunnels. Dr. Vasquez looked up at Sarah with wonder in her eyes. "Captain, if we could somehow trigger this cascade at the right moment, we wouldn't just survive the storm. We'd have our own private highway system through space that no one else could access." Before Sarah could respond, the station shuddered as another quantum wave passed through their shields. The lights flickered, and several consoles sparked. Whatever they were going to do, they needed to do it fast. "How long would it take to set up the trigger mechanism?" Sarah asked. "With our current resources? At least 48 hours of continuous work, assuming nothing goes wrong." Dr. Vasquez paused. "But, Captain, there's no guarantee this will work. The energy release could just as easily tear the station apart." Sarah looked around the bridge at her crew. These were people who had volunteered to spend years in one of the most dangerous regions of known space, far from home and family, all in the name of scientific advancement. They had trusted their alien allies to stand by them when things got difficult. That trust had been betrayed, but that didn't mean they had to give up. "Mr. Webb," she called to the chief engineer, "how many of our people have engineering or technical backgrounds?" "About 40% of the colony, Captain." "Why?" "Because we're going to need all the help we can get. I want every qualified person working on this project in rotating shifts. We have 48 hours to build something that's never been attempted before." Sarah straightened her shoulders and activated the station-wide intercom. "Attention all personnel, this is Captain Shun. By now, most of you are aware that our Confederation allies have withdrawn from the dead zone, leaving us to face the approaching quantum storms alone. I won't lie to you about our situation. We have less than 3 days before our shields fail, and the storms tear this station apart." She paused, letting the weight of their situation sink in before continuing. "However, our science team has identified a potential solution. It's dangerous, untested, and there's no guarantee it will work. But it's a chance, and that's more than we had an hour ago. I'm asking for volunteers to work around the clock on a project that could either save us all or kill us trying. This is not an order. Anyone who doesn't want to participate is free to spend their remaining time however they choose." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within minutes, nearly the entire population of the station had volunteered for the project. Even the civilians with no technical training offered to help with logistics, food preparation, and maintenance duties to free up the engineers and scientists for the critical work. As the hours passed, Sarah watched her people transform the station into a massive construction project. The main cargo bay was converted into a workshop where teams of engineers worked on building the quantum field manipulators they would need. The hydroponics bays became temporary laboratories where scientists ran constant simulations and calculations. Even the residential areas were repurposed as data centers where every available computer was networked together to process the enormous amounts of quantum mathematics required for their plan. Dr. Vasquez had been right about one thing. This had never been attempted before. They were essentially trying to grab hold of the fundamental forces that govern space-time itself and twist them into a new configuration. The energy requirements alone should have made it impossible, but the quantum storms provided more raw power than they could ever use. The trick was learning how to channel and direct that power without being destroyed by it. 18 hours into the project, they hit their first major setback. The quantum field manipulators they had built were being torn apart by the same forces they were trying to control. No matter how they reinforced the equipment the quantum fluctuations found new ways to break it down. "It's not going to work," reported Chief Engineer Webb during an emergency meeting in what used to be the station's conference room. "The field manipulators can't maintain coherence in this environment for more than a few minutes at a time. We need something more stable, more resistant to quantum interference." Sarah rubbed her eyes, feeling the exhaustion of the past day weighing on her. "What do you suggest?" "We need a different approach entirely. Instead of trying to impose our will on the quantum fields, maybe we should work with them." Webb pulled up a holographic display showing the station's current configuration. "What if we turn the entire station into one giant quantum field manipulator? We've got the power distribution network, the sensor arrays, and the structural framework already in place." Dr. Vasquez looked up from her tablet, where she had been running calculations. "That might actually work. The station's hull is made of quantum-resistant alloys. If we could modify the power grid to channel the storm energy through the superstructure itself, we'd be turning ourselves into a living part of the quantum cascade," Sarah finished. "What are the risks?" "Well, if it works, we'll have successfully stabilized our local region of space and created those quantum tunnels I mentioned. If it doesn't work," Dr. Vasquez shrugged, "the station gets torn apart at the molecular level. But honestly, that's not much different from what will happen if we do nothing." Sarah looked around the table at her exhausted but determined senior staff. "How long to implement this new approach?" 24 hours if we push hard and get lucky," Webb replied. "Then, that's what we'll do." Sarah stood up, feeling some of her energy return. "Dr. Vasquez, I need you to finalize the theoretical framework and get it distributed to all the engineering teams. Mr. Webb, start working on the hardware modifications. Ms. Park, I want you to monitor all communication channels. If the Confederation changes their mind and decides to help us after all, I want to know immediately." As her staff dispersed to begin the new phase of their desperate project, Sarah allowed herself a moment to look out at the swirling chaos beyond the station's hull. The quantum storms were beautiful in their own terrifying way, like aurora displays painted across the fabric of space-time itself. For 8 years, she had called this place home. Now it might become their grave. But humans had never been good at accepting defeat gracefully. If they were going to die here in the dead zone, they would die fighting, die trying, die pushing the boundaries of what was possible just a little bit further. And if they managed to survive, well, that would show the galaxy exactly what humanity was capable of when their backs were against the wall. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of frantic activity. Sleep became a luxury that few could afford as every person on the station threw themselves into the modification project. The power grid was completely rewired, turning the entire station into a massive quantum field generator. Sensor arrays were recalibrated to monitor and respond to quantum fluctuations in real time. Even the life support systems were integrated into the new configuration, their magnetic field generators repurposed to help channel the storm energy. With 6 hours remaining until the shields failed, they were as ready as they would ever be. Sarah stood once again on the bridge, looking out at the maelstrom that surrounded them. The quantum storms were reaching their peak intensity, and the space around the station flickered and warped like looking through flowing water. "All stations report ready, Captain," announced Lieutenant Rodriguez. "The quantum cascade trigger is armed and waiting for your command." Sarah nodded and activated the station-wide intercom one final time. "Attention, all personnel. This is it. In a few moments, we're going to attempt something that no one has ever tried before. We're going to grab hold of the quantum storms that have been trying to kill us and turn them into our salvation. I want everyone to know that it has been an honor serving with you these past years. Whatever happens next, remember that we didn't give up. We didn't accept defeat. We fought back with everything we had." She closed the comm channel and turned to Dr. Vasquez at the science station. "Doctor, initiate the quantum cascade." "Initiating cascade in 3, 2, 1 now." The universe went white. Sarah Chen's consciousness returned slowly, like surfacing from the deepest ocean depths. The first thing she noticed was the silence. After days of constant alarm klaxons and the rumble of stressed hull plating, the quiet was almost unnerving. The second thing she noticed was that she was still alive, which meant their desperate gamble had either succeeded beyond their wildest dreams or failed so completely that she was experiencing some form of afterlife. She opened her eyes to find herself lying on the floor of the bridge, with Dr. Vasquez kneeling beside her and checking her pulse with obvious relief. Around them, the rest of the bridge crew was slowly picking themselves up from where they had been thrown by whatever force had swept through the station. "How long was I unconscious?" Sarah asked, accepting the doctor's help to sit up. Her head felt like someone had been using it as a drum, but otherwise she seemed intact. "About 6 hours," Dr. Vasquez replied, helping her to stand. "You weren't the only one. The quantum cascade seems to have generated some kind of neural disruption field. Most of the station's population experienced temporary unconsciousness, but everyone appears to be recovering normally." Sarah looked around the bridge, taking inventory. All of her crew members were moving and responsive, if somewhat shaky. The consoles were all functioning, showing green lights across the board. Most surprisingly, the constant vibration from the quantum storms that had become background noise over the years was completely gone. "Status report," she called out, moving to her command console on unsteady legs. "Captain, you need to see this," Lieutenant Rodriguez said from the navigation station, his voice filled with wonder. "The quantum storms, they're gone. Not just diminished, completely gone. And the sensors are picking up something incredible outside." Sarah moved to the main view screen and activated the external cameras. What she saw defied every assumption she had held about their situation. The chaotic, swirling maelstrom of the dead zone had been replaced by a vast network of stable space, connected by shimmering tunnels of coherent quantum energy. The space around Colony Station Meridian was now crystal clear, offering unobstructed views of distant star systems that had been hidden by the storms for decades. "My God," she whispered. "It actually worked. Better than we ever imagined," Dr. Vasquez said, moving to her science station. "Captain, according to these readings, we haven't just stabilized our local region. The quantum cascade has created a stable pocket of space extending roughly 50 light-years in all directions, with quantum tunnel connections to at least a dozen other stable regions scattered throughout what used to be the dead zone." Chief Engineer Webb looked up from his console with a grin that could have powered the station by itself. "And, Captain, you're going to love this part. The quantum tunnels aren't just stable, they're faster than normal space travel. A ship could traverse the entire network in a matter of days instead of months." Sarah felt a slow smile spreading across her face as the implications began to sink in. They hadn't just survived their abandonment in the dead zone. They had accidentally created their own private highway system through space, completely hidden from the rest of the galaxy. The region that had once been considered impassable was now their exclusive domain. "Dr. Vasquez, I want a complete survey of the entire network. How many stable regions are there? What resources might be available? Are there any other quantum phenomena we should be aware of?" "Already on it, Captain. I'm dispatching survey probes to map the tunnel network and catalog everything we can find. Initial scans suggest there are at least 20 stable regions connected to our position, some of them quite large." "And Captain," the scientist paused, checking her readings again. "Some of these regions contain stellar systems that were never accessible before the storms formed. We might have stumbled onto completely unexplored space." The next few weeks passed in a blur of exploration and discovery. Small teams of volunteers took shuttles through the quantum tunnels, mapping the new territory and cataloging resources. What they found exceeded their wildest expectations. The stable regions contained pristine star systems rich in rare minerals and exotic matter, asteroid fields dense with resources that could support massive construction projects, and, most remarkably, several habitable worlds that showed no signs of previous colonization. The quantum tunnels made travel between these regions almost instantaneous, creating the foundation for a civilization that could span dozens of star systems without the years-long travel times that limited other species. But Sarah knew their paradise wouldn't remain secret forever. The Galactic Confederation would eventually send scouts to investigate what had happened in the Dead Zone, if only to confirm that the region could no longer serve as a barrier against the Devourers. When that happened, humanity would need to be ready. "We need to start thinking about our long-term strategy," Sarah announced during a staff meeting 3 weeks after the cascade. "Sooner or later, the Confederation is going to discover what we've accomplished here. When they do, they're going to want access to our quantum tunnel network." "Let them want," Lieutenant Rodriguez said with obvious anger. "They abandoned us to die. As far as I'm concerned, they can find their own way through space." "I understand the sentiment," Sarah replied, "but we need to think bigger than revenge. The Devourers are still out there, still advancing. If they reach Confederation space, billions of sentient beings will die. We can't ignore that reality just because their leaders betrayed us." Dr. Vasquez looked up from her ever-present tablet. "Captain, I've been thinking about the Devourer problem. Based on what we know about their behavior patterns, they seem to consume matter by breaking down molecular bonds and converting the released energy into more of themselves. But our quantum tunnels exist in a state of suspended space-time. They're not really matter in any conventional sense. You think the tunnels might be immune to the Devourers?" Sarah asked. "More than that, I think the Devourers might not even be able to detect them. From their perspective, the space occupied by our network would appear to be empty vacuum. They would have no reason to try to consume it." Chief Engineer Webb leaned forward in his chair. "Are you suggesting we could use the tunnel network as a refuge? Evacuate people from the path of the Devourers and hide them in our stable regions?" "That's exactly what I'm suggesting," Dr. Vasquez replied. "But it would require a massive expansion of our current infrastructure. We're talking about potentially housing millions of refugees from dozens of different species." Sarah considered the implications. Such a project would require resources and manpower on a scale that dwarfed anything they had attempted so far. But it would also give humanity a unique position in galactic politics. Instead of being the junior partners in the Confederation, they would become the guardians of a vital refuge from the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known. "What would we need to make something like that possible?" she asked. "Ships," Webb replied immediately. "Lots of ships. Our shuttle fleet is fine for local exploration, but if we're going to start evacuating populations from multiple star systems, we need vessels capable of carrying thousands of people through the quantum tunnels. And construction materials," added Dr. Vasquez. "The stable regions have plenty of raw resources, but we need automated mining and manufacturing systems to process them on the scale we're talking about." Sarah nodded slowly. "Both of those things are available in Confederation space, if we're willing to trade for them." "Trade with what?" Rodriguez asked. "We've got quantum tunnel access, but that's not exactly something we can ship to them." "No, but the scientific knowledge we've gained here is priceless," Sarah replied. "Our understanding of quantum mechanics has advanced by decades in the past few weeks. That's valuable enough to buy us everything we need." Over the next month, Sarah worked with her senior staff to develop a comprehensive plan. They would make contact with the Galactic Confederation and offer to share their quantum research in exchange for ships, equipment, and personnel. They would present themselves not as refugees seeking charity, but as an independent power with valuable resources to trade. The first step was re-establishing communication. The quantum cascade had disabled their long-range communications array, but Chief Engineer Webb's teams had been working to adapt their equipment to work through the tunnel network. By routing signals through quantum relays positioned throughout their territory, they could send messages far beyond the former boundaries of the Dead Zone. Sarah's first transmission was directed to Confederation High Command on Zephyr Prime, the capital world of the Zephyrian Republic. She chose her words carefully, knowing that this initial contact would set the tone for all future negotiations. "This is Captain Sarah Chun of Colony Station Meridian, broadcasting from the former Dead Zone. Contrary to your assumptions, the human research contingent survived the quantum storms and has made significant scientific breakthroughs in the field of space-time manipulation. We are prepared to discuss sharing our discoveries with the Confederation in exchange for mutual cooperation and trade agreements. Respond on this frequency when you're ready to begin formal negotiations. The response came 3 days later, and it was not what Sarah had expected. Instead of a message from Confederation High Command, she received a transmission from Admiral Zektar, the Zephyrian Fleet commander who had been responsible for evacuating the other species from the dead zone. Captain Chun, Admiral Zektar speaking. Your survival is unexpected. The Confederation High Command has authorized me to investigate your claims and determine what resources might be salvageable from your position. I will arrive at the former dead zone boundary with a small fleet in 10 days. Do not attempt to leave your current position until my arrival. The arrogance in the Admiral's tone made Sarah's jaw clench. Even after abandoning them to die, the Confederation still expected humanity to follow their orders without question. It was time to demonstrate that the balance of power had shifted. Mr. Webb, she called to her chief engineer. How quickly can we get one of our heavy shuttles to the edge of Confederation space? Through the tunnels? About 8 hours, Captain. What? Because Admiral Zektar is about to get a very unpleasant surprise. Sarah's plan was elegantly simple. Instead of waiting for the Confederation fleet to come to them, they would intercept the Admiral's ships at the edge of what used to be the dead zone. The quantum tunnels would allow them to position themselves perfectly for the encounter, while the Confederation ships would have to spend days traveling through normal space. The shuttle Sarah chose for the mission was the largest in their fleet, modified with enhanced sensors and communication equipment. She took a small crew with her, including Dr. Vasquez to provide scientific expertise and Lieutenant Rodriguez to handle tactical operations if things went badly. The quantum tunnel journey was unlike anything Sarah had experienced before. Instead of the violent, chaotic passage through hyperspace that characterized most faster-than-light travel, moving through the tunnels felt almost serene. The shuttle seemed to float through corridors of crystalline light that stretched infinitely in all directions, while the journey that should have taken weeks was completed in mere hours. They emerged from the tunnel network at the precise coordinates Sarah had calculated, positioning themselves directly in the path of Admiral Zektar's approaching fleet. Long-range sensors confirmed that the Confederation ships were still 2 days away from their destination, completely unaware that they were being watched. Sarah settled in to wait, using the time to review everything they knew about Admiral Zektar and his command structure. The Zephyrians were among the most militaristic species in the Confederation, with a culture that valued strength and decisive action above all else. Zektar himself was known for his tactical brilliance and his complete lack of patience for what he considered inferior species. When the Confederation fleet finally arrived at the dead zone boundary, Sarah was ready for them. She waited until the lead ships had committed to their approach vector before activating her shuttle's communication array and hailing the Admiral's flagship. Admiral Zektar, this is Captain Chun. Welcome to human space. The response was immediate and predictably explosive. Captain Chun, where did you come from? Our sensors showed no ships in this region. That's because you're using outdated technology, Admiral. A lot has changed since you abandoned us here to die. Sarah kept her voice level and professional, but she made sure the accusation was clear. I trust you received my transmission regarding our scientific breakthroughs? Yes, I received your message. The Confederation High Command is interested in recovering any useful data from your research station before the area becomes completely unstable. You will transfer your findings to my ships and prepare for evacuation. Sarah almost laughed at the Admiral's assumption that he was still in control of the situation. I'm afraid that won't be possible, Admiral. The data you're referring to is classified under human territorial law. However, we would be happy to discuss licensing agreements for selected technologies. Territorial law? Captain, you are in unclaimed space. The Confederation does not recognize any human territorial claims beyond your registered colony worlds. Then, perhaps you should update your star charts, Sarah replied calmly. This region is no longer the dead zone. We have established permanent settlements across 17 star systems connected by our proprietary transportation network. The Confederation's abandonment of our people constituted a formal renunciation of any claims to this territory. The communication channel was silent for a long moment. Sarah could imagine the Admiral's confusion as his tactical officers tried to explain how a single shuttle had appeared in empty space without any sensor warning. "Captain," the Admiral's voice returned, considerably less certain than before. "I require proof of these claims. Transmit your territorial surveys and infrastructure reports for verification." "Of course, Admiral. But first, allow me to demonstrate the nature of our transportation network." Sarah nodded to Lieutenant Rodriguez, who activated the shuttle's quantum tunnel generator. The small craft vanished from normal space, traveled instantaneously through the tunnel network to a position behind the Confederation fleet, and reappeared with a flash of crystalline light directly off the flagship's stern. The reaction from the Confederation ships was immediate and chaotic. Weapon systems powered up, shields activated, and the entire fleet moved into defensive formation. Sarah's shuttle was suddenly targeted by enough firepower to level a city, but she remained calm. "As you can see, Admiral, our technological capabilities have advanced significantly since your last visit. The quantum tunnel network allows instantaneous travel across distances that would take your ships weeks to traverse. I thought you should understand the strategic implications before we begin our negotiations." Admiral Zektar's voice, when it came back over the comm, was tight with barely controlled anger. "Captain, you will explain this technology immediately. The Confederation High Command will not tolerate the development of strategic weapons by unsanctioned groups." "I'm afraid you misunderstand our relationship, Admiral. Humanity is no longer a client species of the Confederation. We are an independent power, and this is our territory. However, we remain interested in maintaining peaceful relations with our former allies." Sarah paused to let that sink in before continuing. "The quantum tunnel network represents a significant advancement in space-time manipulation technology. We are prepared to share selected aspects of this research with the Confederation in exchange for formal recognition of our territorial claims and the establishment of mutually beneficial trade agreements. And if the Confederation chooses not to recognize your territorial claims, then the Confederation will find itself cut off from the most significant transportation innovation in galactic history. Your ships will continue to take weeks or months to travel between distant sectors, while our vessels move instantaneously through space. The strategic advantages should be obvious to someone of your tactical expertise." The communication channel went silent again, and Sarah could imagine the frantic consultations taking place aboard the Admiral's flagship. The Confederation had expected to find the remnants of a failed colony, ready to be evacuated and forgotten. Instead, they had discovered that humanity had become a regional power with technology that could revolutionize space travel. When Admiral Zektar's voice returned, it carried a tone of grudging respect. "Captain Chun, I believe this matter has grown beyond my authority to resolve. I will need to consult with Confederation High Command before proceeding. Will you agree to a temporary ceasefire while negotiations are arranged?" "Of course, Admiral. But I should mention that time is a factor. Our intelligence suggests that the Devourers will reach the outer rim of Confederation space within 6 months. If you want our help in dealing with that threat, we should begin serious negotiations as soon as possible." "You have intelligence on the Devourers?" "Admiral, we have a lot of things that might surprise you, but those discussions will need to wait for proper diplomatic channels. I suggest you contact your superiors immediately." After the Confederation fleet departed to report their findings, Sarah returned through the quantum tunnels to Colony Station Meridian. She had achieved everything she had hoped for from the encounter. Admiral Zektar would report to his superiors that humanity had not only survived in the dead zone, but had thrived, developing technology that could change the balance of power in the galaxy. More importantly, she had established humanity's position as an equal partner rather than a supplicant. When formal negotiations began, they would be dealing from a position of strength. The response from Confederation High Command came 2 weeks later in the form of a formal diplomatic mission led by Ambassador Tel Nash of the Nexri Republic. The Nexri were known throughout the galaxy as skilled negotiators and mediators, making them the obvious choice to handle such delicate discussions. Sarah met the ambassador's ship at the edge of their territory, this time in a proper diplomatic vessel that Dr. Vasquez had designed using quantum tunnel technology. The ship was small but elegant, its hull embedded with crystalline structures that channeled quantum energy in patterns visible to the naked eye. It was designed to demonstrate humanity's technological sophistication while remaining non-threatening. Ambassador Tel Nash was a tall, graceful being with the characteristic silver skin and large, dark eyes of her species. She greeted Sarah with the formal courtesy protocol used for meetings between sovereign powers, a gesture that confirmed humanity's new status in galactic politics. Captain Chun, I bring greetings from the Galactic Confederation and an invitation to discuss formal diplomatic relations between our peoples. Your recent achievements have attracted considerable interest among the member species. Ambassador, I appreciate the Confederation's willingness to recognize the changed circumstances in this region. I trust Admiral Zektar provided a complete report of our capabilities. He did indeed. The technological innovations you have developed are most impressive. The High Command is particularly interested in understanding how your quantum tunnel network might be utilized in our ongoing conflict with the Devourers. Sarah smiled. The negotiations were about to begin in earnest, and she held all the best cards. Humanity had gone from abandoned refugees to galactic power brokers in a matter of months, and they were just getting started. The diplomatic negotiations with Ambassador Tel Nash took place aboard Colony Station Meridian, in a conference room that had been hastily converted from a storage bay. Sarah had deliberately chosen the most humble setting available, wanting to remind the Confederation representative that humanity had built something remarkable from nothing while being abandoned to die in hostile space. Ambassador Tel Nash sat across from Sarah at a simple metal table, her silver features composed in the neutral expression that Nexri diplomats were famous for. But Sarah caught glimpses of genuine curiosity in the ambassador's dark eyes as she studied the quantum energy displays that Dr. Vasquez had integrated into the station's walls. The crystalline patterns pulsed with soft light, a visible reminder of the revolutionary technology that now gave humanity unprecedented power in the galaxy. The Confederation High Command has authorized me to negotiate a formal recognition of human territorial claims in this region. The ambassador began, her voice carrying the melodic quality typical of her species. In exchange, we would request access to your quantum tunnel technology for transportation and logistics purposes. Sarah leaned back in her chair, considering her response carefully. The opening offer was exactly what she had expected. Too little, too late. Ambassador, I appreciate the Confederation's willingness to recognize our sovereignty. However, I think there may be a misunderstanding about the nature of our relationship going forward. Oh, please clarify. The Confederation abandoned 23,000 human beings in the dead zone to serve as a tripwire against the Devourers. We were expendable resources, not valued allies. Now that we've not only survived, but developed strategic capabilities that could change the course of the war, suddenly, we're worth negotiating with. Sarah's voice remained calm, but her words carried an edge that made the ambassador straighten slightly. The decision to withdraw from the dead zone was a military necessity, Tel Nash replied carefully. The approaching quantum storms posed an unacceptable risk to non-essential personnel. Non-essential? Sarah almost laughed. Ambassador, for 8 years, human researchers made breakthrough discoveries that advanced galactic science by decades. We developed new techniques for quantum field manipulation, exotic matter processing, and space-time analysis. Our work was so valuable that the Confederation built this entire research station around our efforts. She gestured to the displays around them, where real-time data showed the status of the quantum tunnel network. And when the Devourers threatened your core worlds, you decided we were expendable enough to serve as a sacrificial barrier. That's not the behavior of an ally. That's the behavior of someone who views humans as useful tools to be discarded when convenient. Ambassador Telnash was quiet for a long moment, her dark eyes studying Sarah's face. When she spoke again, her tone had shifted from formal diplomacy to something more personal. You're right, Captain. The decision to abandon your people was a betrayal of the principles the Confederation claims to uphold. I cannot undo that choice, but I can ensure that future relations are built on a foundation of mutual respect rather than exploitation. The admission surprised Sarah. She had expected the ambassador to defend the Confederation's actions, not acknowledge their moral failure. It was either a skilled negotiating tactic or a sign that the galaxy's political landscape was shifting more dramatically than she had realized. I appreciate your honesty, Ambassador, but words alone won't rebuild the trust that was broken. If the Confederation wants access to our technology and territory, they need to demonstrate that they view humanity as an equal partner, not a subordinate species. What would such a demonstration look like? Sarah had been preparing for this question since the negotiations began. First, full recognition of human sovereignty over the quantum tunnel network and all territories connected to it. Not just acknowledgement, but formal treaties that guarantee our independence and territorial integrity. That seems reasonable, the ambassador agreed. Second, reparations for the abandonment in the dead zone. The Confederation ordered us to stay behind, knowing we would likely die. The fact that we survived doesn't erase the moral debt incurred by that decision. Tia Nash nodded slowly. What form would these reparations take? Ships, equipment, and personnel to help us expand our infrastructure. We're talking about potentially housing millions of refugees from the Devourer advance. That requires construction capabilities on a massive scale. And the third condition, the ambassador asked, correctly anticipating that Sarah wasn't finished. A seat on the Confederation High Command with full voting rights. If humanity is going to help fight the Devourers, we need an equal voice in strategic planning. No more decisions made about us without us. The ambassador was quiet for several minutes, clearly calculating the political implications of Sarah's demands. What she was asking for would fundamentally change humanity's position in galactic politics, elevating them from client species to major power in a single negotiation. Captain, these are significant requests. I will need to consult with my superiors before providing a formal response. However, I can tell you that the High Command is very concerned about the Devourer advance. Our latest intelligence suggests they will reach the outer colonies within 4 months, not 6 as previously estimated. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. If the Devourers were moving faster than expected, it meant they had even less time to prepare their refugee network than she had hoped. What changed in your intelligence assessment? The Devourers appear to be adapting their consumption patterns. Early encounters suggested they process matter at a relatively slow rate, giving populations time to evacuate ahead of their advance. Recent attacks show them moving much more efficiently, consuming entire star systems in days rather than weeks. How many refugees are we potentially talking about? Conservative estimates suggest 15 million sentients in the path of the Devourer advance over the next year. That includes civilian populations from 12 different species across 43 colony worlds. The numbers were staggering. Even with the resources of the quantum tunnel network, housing and supporting 15 million refugees would require a construction project unlike anything attempted in galactic history. But Sarah realized this crisis also represented an opportunity to cement humanity's new position as a major power. Ambassador, I'm prepared to make a counter-proposal. Humanity will provide sanctuary for all refugees from the Devourer advance, using our quantum tunnel network to transport them to safety and our expanded infrastructure to house and support them. In exchange, the Confederation will provide the ships, equipment, and raw materials necessary for this humanitarian effort. And your other conditions? Remain unchanged. Full sovereignty, reparations, and equal representation. But I'm willing to discuss implementation timelines that account for the current crisis. Telnash leaned forward, her expression shifting to one of intense interest. You're proposing to save 15 million lives in exchange for political recognition? I'm proposing to save 15 million lives because it's the right thing to do, Sarah corrected. The political recognition is simply the price of Confederation cooperation in making it possible. The ambassador spent the next 3 days touring the quantum tunnel network, accompanied by Dr. Vasquez and a team of human scientists who demonstrated their technological capabilities. Sarah made sure Telnash saw everything. The pristine star systems now accessible through the tunnels, the automated mining operations that were already producing construction materials, and, most importantly, the preliminary refugee settlements that were being established on habitable worlds throughout their territory. When the tour concluded, Ambassador Telnash requested a private meeting with Sarah in the station's observation lounge, a small chamber with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a spectacular view of the stabilized space around Colony Station Meridian. Captain, I have to admit that what your people have accomplished here exceeds my wildest expectations, the ambassador said, looking out at the crystalline formations that mark the entrance to nearby quantum tunnels. When I received this assignment, I expected to negotiate salvage rights for abandoned research data. Instead, I find myself discussing the terms of humanity's ascension to major power status. It's been quite a journey for us as well, Sarah replied. 6 months ago, we were research assistants helping other species understand quantum mechanics. Today, we're potentially the galaxy's best hope for preserving civilization against an existential threat. The High Command has authorized me to accept your terms, Telnash said quietly. Full sovereignty over your territorial network, reparations in the form of construction support, and a seat on the High Command with voting rights. In exchange, you will provide sanctuary for refugees from the Devourer Advance, and share quantum tunnel technology for humanitarian transportation purposes. Sarah felt a surge of triumph, but she kept her expression neutral. I'm pleased that the Confederation has chosen to move forward on the basis of mutual respect and cooperation. When can we expect the formal treaty signing? The documents are already being prepared on Zephyr Prime. However, there is one additional matter that the High Command asked me to discuss with you privately. Oh, the Devourers aren't just consuming matter, Captain. Our xenobiologists have been studying their behavior patterns, and they believe the Devourers are actually a form of collective intelligence that grows stronger with each world they consume. The knowledge, experiences, and even consciousness of every species they encounter appears to be absorbed and integrated into their collective mind. Sarah felt her blood run cold. You're saying they're not just killing people, they're stealing everything that makes them who they are? That's our working theory, which means this isn't just about preserving lives, it's about preserving the accumulated knowledge and culture of dozens of civilizations. The refugee populations you're offering to protect represent the living repositories of everything their species have achieved. The weight of that responsibility settled on Sarah's shoulders like a lead cloak. They weren't just building refugee camps, they were creating an archive of galactic civilization itself. Every individual they saved carried irreplaceable knowledge, art, history, and cultural traditions that would be lost forever if the Devourers consumed their worlds. Ambassador, we'll need more than just construction materials and equipment. We'll need teachers, historians, artists, and cultural preservationists from every refugee species. If we're going to maintain their civilizations in exile, we need to understand what makes each culture unique. The High Command anticipated that request. They're prepared to assign specialist teams to work with your people in establishing comprehensive cultural preservation programs. Think of it as the galaxy's largest library and museum, but one populated by living people rather than artifacts. Over the following weeks, as the formal treaty negotiations concluded, Sarah watched her quiet research station transform into the nerve center of the galaxy's largest humanitarian operation. Ships arrived daily through the quantum tunnels, bringing construction equipment, cultural specialists, and advanced teams of refugees whose worlds were in the immediate path of the Devourer advance. The first major test of their evacuation capabilities came when the Caltharian colony of New Talos sent out a distress call. The Devourers had been detected at the edge of their star system, and the colony's 3 million inhabitants had less than 48 hours before their world would be consumed. Sarah coordinated the evacuation from the station's command center, watching as human-designed transport ships moved through the quantum tunnels at speeds that defied conventional physics. The largest ships could carry 50,000 passengers per trip, meaning they needed 60 round trips to evacuate the entire population. Transport Fleet Alpha is beginning the first extraction run, reported Lieutenant Rodriguez from his coordination station. Estimated time to complete evacuation is 36 hours. Dr. Vasquez looked up from her monitoring console with obvious concern. Captain, the quantum energy expenditure for this operation is enormous. We're channeling more power through the tunnel network in one day than we normally use in a month. The crystalline matrices are holding, but we're operating at the very edge of their design specifications. Can the network handle it? Sarah asked. For now, yes. But if we're going to be conducting operations like this regularly, we need to expand the quantum generator capacity significantly. I'm talking about construction projects that would make our original station modifications look like minor repairs. Sarah nodded grimly. The scale of what they were attempting was beginning to sink in. They weren't just saving refugees, they were building the infrastructure to support an entirely new form of civilization, one that existed across dozens of star systems connected by quantum tunnels, capable of moving entire populations to safety at a moment's notice. Dr. Vasquez, draw up plans for the quantum network expansion. Mr. Webb, I want estimates on construction timelines and resource requirements. Ms. Park, open a channel to Ambassador Telnash. We need to discuss accelerated delivery of construction materials. The Caltharian evacuation was completed with 6 hours to spare. As the last transport ship cleared New Talos through the quantum tunnels, long-range sensors detected the arrival of the Devourer swarm at the colony world. Within minutes, the thriving planet was reduced to empty space, its matter and energy consumed and integrated into the advancing collective consciousness. But 3 million Caltharian lives had been saved, along with their art, their music, their literature, and their accumulated knowledge of advanced metallurgy and engineering. They were now safely housed in temporary settlements on 3 different worlds within the quantum network, where human construction teams were working around the clock to build permanent communities designed specifically for Caltharian environmental and cultural needs. Captain, Dr. Vasquez called out as the evacuation ships returned through the tunnels. I'm reading something unusual in the quantum field patterns around New Talos. The Devourer's consumption process appears to have created some kind of resonance effect in local space-time. Sarah moved to look at the scientist display. What kind of resonance? I'm not entirely sure, but it looks like their feeding process generates quantum echoes that propagate through subspace. If my calculations are correct, these echoes might be detectable from considerable distances. You're thinking we could use them as an early warning system? Exactly. If we deploy quantum resonance detectors throughout Confederation space, we could potentially predict Devourer movements days or even weeks in advance. That would give us much more time to coordinate evacuations. Sarah felt the first spark of hope she had experienced since learning about the accelerated Devourer timeline. An early warning system would be a game-changer for their refugee operations, allowing them to position evacuation fleets in advance rather than responding to emergency calls. Dr. Vasquez, I want you to work with the Confederation science teams to deploy those detectors as quickly as possible. This could be the key to staying ahead of the Devourer advance. As the weeks passed, the quantum tunnel network became the backbone of the galaxy's resistance to the Devourer threat. More than just a transportation system, it evolved into a complete civilization unto itself, a network of interconnected worlds where refugees from dozens of species work together to preserve their cultures while contributing to the collective defense effort. Human scientists collaborated with Caltharian engineers to improve quantum tunnel efficiency. Nexary diplomats worked with Zephyrian military strategists to coordinate evacuation priorities. Artists and musicians from a dozen species created new hybrid art forms that celebrated their shared survival experience. But Sarah knew their greatest test was still to come. The Devourers were learning, adapting, becoming more efficient with each world they consumed. Eventually, they would find a way to detect or counter the quantum tunnel network. When that happened, humanity and their refugee populations would need to be ready for a different kind of war entirely. Standing in the observation lounge of Colony Station Meridian, looking out at the peaceful stars that now filled what had once been the chaotic dead zone, Sarah began planning for that confrontation. They had saved millions of lives and preserved dozens of civilizations, but the real battle for the galaxy's survival was still ahead of them. The abandoned humans of the Dead Zone had become the guardians of galactic civilization. Soon, they would become its sword and shield as well. 6 months after the first Caltharian evacuation, Sarah Chun stood in the war room of what had once been Colony Station Meridian, but was now the command center of the largest military alliance in galactic history. The walls displayed real-time tactical data from across the spiral arm, Devourer movement patterns, refugee evacuation schedules, and the positions of the combined fleet that humanity now commanded. It was a fleet unlike any other ever assembled. Human-designed quantum tunnel ships moved alongside Zephyrian battlecruisers, Caltharian engineering vessels, and Nexary diplomatic frigates. Nearly 200 vessels from 15 different species, all united under human command, because humanity controlled the only transportation network that could move faster than the Devourers could advance. "Status report," Sarah called out as she entered the room. The title on her uniform had changed from captain to admiral, a promotion that reflected her new role as supreme commander of the combined refugee defense fleet. "The early warning network is functioning perfectly," reported Dr. Vasquez from her expanded science station. "We're detecting Devourer approach signatures an average of 12 days before they reach target systems. That's given us time to evacuate 17 colonies completely and relocate their populations to safe zones within our network." Chief Engineer Webb looked up from his construction status display. "The expanded quantum generator network is online and stable. We can now support continuous evacuation operations across 6 different sectors simultaneously without straining the tunnel systems." Lieutenant Rodriguez, now promoted to commander and serving as fleet coordinator, gestured to the tactical display. "The combined fleet is positioned to respond to threats across the outer rim. Our mobile response capability has increased evacuation efficiency by 300% compared to the early operations." Sarah nodded with satisfaction, but her expression remained grim. They had saved over 8 million lives in the past 6 months, preserving the cultures and knowledge of dozens of species. But the Devourers continued to advance, consuming world after world despite their evacuation efforts. For every victory, there were reminders that they were fighting a holding action against an enemy that seemed unstoppable. "Any changes in Devourer behavior patterns?" she asked. Dr. Vasquez hesitated before responding, which immediately caught Sarah's attention. "Actually, yes. The quantum resonance signatures have been evolving. The Devourers appear to be learning to mask their approach signatures, making detection more difficult. And there's something else." "What?" "The consumption process itself has changed. Early attacks showed the Devourers breaking down matter at the molecular level and absorbing the released energy. Recent attacks show them doing something more sophisticated. They appear to be cataloging and preserving complex information structures before consuming the physical matter." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "You're saying they're becoming more efficient at absorbing the knowledge and consciousness of their victims?" "That's my interpretation. Each attack makes them smarter, more adaptable. They're not just growing in size and power, they're accumulating the collective intelligence of every species they consume." The implications were terrifying. If the Devourers were absorbing knowledge as well as matter, They would eventually understand quantum tunnel technology, faster than light communication, and every other advantage the combined fleet possessed. The refugees weren't just hiding from a predator. They were racing against an enemy that became more dangerous with every victory. How long before they might understand our quantum network well enough to counter it? Sarah asked. Based on the rate of technological absorption we've observed, maybe 3 months. Possibly less if they consume a species with advanced space-time manipulation capabilities. Sarah turned to the tactical display, studying the current positions of devourer swarms across the galaxy. They had consumed roughly 30% of known civilization, leaving vast empty sectors where thriving star systems had once existed. The combined refugee populations now numbered nearly 15 million beings scattered across the quantum network safe zones. Commander Rodriguez, I want you to convene an emergency session of the Allied Species Council. We need to discuss a fundamental change in our strategy. What kind of change, Admiral? Rodriguez asked. We've been fighting a defensive war, trying to stay one step ahead of an enemy that gets stronger every time it wins. That approach has saved millions of lives, but it's not sustainable. The Devourers will eventually figure out how to counter our advantages, and when that happens, we'll lose everything we've worked to preserve. Sarah paused, knowing that her next words would change everything. It's time to stop running and start fighting back. The Allied Species Council meeting took place in the main conference chamber of the station, a vast hall that had been constructed specifically to accommodate representatives from all 15 refugee species. The site never failed to impress Sarah. Beings of every imaginable form sitting together, united by their shared survival and their trust in human leadership. Ambassador Telnash, now serving as the Confederation's permanent liaison to the Refugee Alliance, spoke for many when she expressed concern about Sarah's proposal. Admiral, with respect, offensive operations against the Devourers have failed catastrophically for every species that has attempted them. The combined military forces of the Keltharian Republic were destroyed in less than 6 hours. The Zephyrian home fleet lasted only marginally longer. Those attacks failed because they used conventional tactics against an unconventional enemy, Sarah replied. The Devourers have adapted to counter traditional military strategies. Energy weapons, kinetic bombardment, even nuclear weapons. But they've never faced an enemy that could strike from multiple dimensions simultaneously using quantum tunnel technology. General Kethvar of the Zephyrian military leaned forward in his chair, his reptilian features showing obvious interest. Explain your tactical concept, Admiral. Sarah activated the holographic display in the center of the chamber, showing a three-dimensional map of a typical Devourer swarm structure. Traditional attacks focus on the central core of the swarm, which is defended by billions of smaller consumption units. Instead of fighting through those defenses, we use quantum tunnels to bypass them entirely. The display shifted to show strike ships appearing instantly at multiple points throughout the swarm structure. Simultaneous attacks from dozens of positions, using weapons specifically designed to disrupt the quantum fields that hold the swarm together. Instead of trying to destroy the individual units, we target the collective consciousness that coordinates them. How do we disrupt something we don't understand? Asked Dr. NELTHYSS, the lead researcher from the Nexury scientific contingent. We don't need to understand it completely, Dr. Vasquez answered, stepping forward to address the council. Our analysis of quantum resonance patterns suggests that the Devourer collective consciousness operates by maintaining quantum entanglement across all units in the swarm. Disrupting that entanglement field should cause the swarm to lose coordination and potentially break apart entirely. And the weapons to accomplish this disruption. General Ketvar in Kvyet. Sarah smiled grimly. That's where human ingenuity comes in. We've developed quantum cascade torpedoes based on the same principles that created our tunnel network. Each torpedo contains a miniaturized version of the quantum field manipulation technology that stabilized the dead zone. When they detonate, they create localized quantum storms that should disrupt any entanglement fields in the immediate area. The council chamber erupted in excited discussion as representatives from each species considered the implications. It was Ambassador Telnash who voiced the critical question that everyone was thinking. Admiral, if this attack succeeds, what prevents the Devourers from adapting their defenses and becoming immune to future quantum cascade attacks? Nothing, Sarah admitted honestly. This strategy will probably only work once, maybe twice if we're lucky. But if we can destroy even one major swarm, we'll learn something about their internal structure and weaknesses. That knowledge might lead to more sustainable countermeasures. And if the attack fails, asked Counselor Vexala of the Caltharian contingent. Then, we continue evacuation operations until they figure out how to counter our quantum tunnels, at which point we all die together instead of separately. Sarah's blunt assessment silenced the chamber. The choice is simple. We can keep running until we have nowhere left to run, or we can fight back while we still have the advantage of surprise. The vote was closer than Sarah had hoped, but decisive enough to proceed. 12 species supported the offensive strategy, while 3 preferred to continue defensive operations. Sarah respected the dissenting opinions, but knew that military command required unity of purpose rather than unanimous consensus. Over the next month, the combined fleet was reorganized for offensive operations. The largest refugee transport ships were converted into mobile quantum cascade torpedo factories, using raw materials gathered from asteroid fields throughout the tunnel network. Human engineers worked alongside specialists from every refugee species to develop weapons systems that had never been attempted before. The quantum cascade torpedoes were marvels of collaborative engineering. The warheads used human quantum field manipulation technology, guided by Zephyrian targeting systems, powered by Caltharian energy cells, and programmed with Nexari artificial intelligence algorithms. Each torpedo represented the combined scientific achievement of 15 different species working toward a common goal. The weapon testing is complete, Dr. Vasquez reported during the final pre-mission briefing. The Cascade torpedoes perform exactly as designed in laboratory conditions. However, I should note that we have no way to predict how they will interact with an actual Devourer swarm's quantum field matrix. Sarah nodded, studying the tactical displays that showed their target, a medium-sized Devourer swarm that was approaching the Rigel sector, where 2 million refugees from the outer colonies were waiting for evacuation. The swarm contained an estimated 50 billion individual consumption units organized around a central coordination core roughly the size of a small moon. Fleet status. Sarah asked Commander Rodriguez. All ships are positioned and ready for quantum tunnel deployment. Strike Force consists of 47 vessels carrying a total of 600 quantum cascade torpedoes. Support fleet includes medical ships, evacuation vessels, and mobile repair facilities positioned at safe distances. Remember, this isn't about destroying every unit in the swarm. Sarah addressed her Strike Force commanders over the fleet communication system. Our objective is to disrupt their collective consciousness long enough to study their response patterns and gather intelligence about their internal structure. If the attack succeeds beyond our expectations, we'll adapt our strategy accordingly. If it fails, we retreat through the quantum tunnels and reassess our options. The quantum tunnel deployment was the largest military operation ever conducted using the technology. 47 strike ships vanished from normal space simultaneously, traveling instantaneously through the tunnel network to predetermined positions surrounding the Devourer swarm. The coordination required split-second timing across multiple dimensional layers, a feat that would have been impossible without the hybrid artificial intelligence systems developed by the Refugee Alliance. Sarah watched from the command ship as her fleet emerged from the quantum tunnels in perfect formation around the Devourer swarm. The enemy collective showed no immediate reaction to their sudden appearance, continuing its methodical advance toward the Rigel sector as if the combined fleet didn't exist. All ships report ready for synchronized torpedo launch, Commander Rodriguez announced. Firing solution confirmed, targets locked. Fire when ready, Sarah ordered. 600 quantum cascade torpedoes launched simultaneously from positions throughout three-dimensional space, converging on the central coordination core of the Devourer swarm. The effect was unlike anything Sarah had ever witnessed. Instead of conventional explosions, the torpedoes detonated in cascades of crystalline light that spread outward like ripples in a quantum pond. Where the cascade waves intersected with Devourer units, the consuming organisms simply stopped functioning, drifting helplessly in space as their connection to the collective consciousness was severed. But the most dramatic effect occurred at the swarm's central core. The massive coordination structure, which had maintained perfect organization among 50 billion separate units, began to convulse and fragment as quantum cascade waves disrupted its entanglement fields. Sections of the core broke away and drifted apart, while others collapsed in on themselves as their structural integrity failed. "Admiral, you need to see this," Dr. Vasquez called out, her voice filled with excitement and terror in equal measure. "The quantum disruption is propagating through the entire swarm network. The individual consumption units are losing coordination and starting to attack each other." Sarah watched in fascination as the disciplined Devourer swarm dissolved into chaos. Without the guiding intelligence of the collective consciousness, the individual consumption units reverted to basic predatory behavior, consuming whatever matter was closest to them. Since the closest matter happened to be other Devourer units, the swarm began cannibalizing itself in an orgy of self-destruction. "How long until the disruption effect wears off?" Sarah asked. "Unknown. The quantum cascade appears to have created a persistent interference pattern that's preventing the collective consciousness from re-establishing control. It's possible that the effect could be permanent." Within 6 hours, the Devourer swarm had been reduced to scattered debris and a few thousand individual units that posed no significant threat to inhabited systems. The quantum cascade torpedoes had achieved something that no conventional weapon had ever accomplished: the complete destruction of a major Devourer collective. But even as Sarah celebrated this unprecedented victory, she was already planning the next phase of their counteroffensive. The attack had provided invaluable intelligence about Devourer vulnerabilities, but it had also revealed the true scale of the challenge they faced. "Dr. Vasquez, how many more swarms are there between here and the galactic core?" The scientist consulted her long-range sensor data with obvious reluctance. "Conservative estimates suggest at least 300 similar swarms, with some significantly larger than the one we just destroyed. And our current torpedo production capacity, at maximum manufacturing rate, we could produce enough cascade torpedoes to engage perhaps 20 more swarms before exhausting our raw material reserves." Sarah nodded grimly. One victory, no matter how spectacular, was not enough to win a war against an enemy that had consumed 30% of the galaxy. But it was proof that the Devourers could be defeated, and that was more hope than anyone had possessed 6 months ago. "Commander Rodriguez, prepare a message to all Allied Species Council representatives. We're calling an emergency session to discuss the next phase of our offensive strategy." "What's the next phase, Admiral?" Rodriguez asked. Sarah looked at the tactical display, showing the locations of known Devourer swarms scattered across the galaxy. Each one represented billions of consumed lives and entire civilizations reduced to empty space. But now, they also represented targets that could be defeated using the same quantum cascade technology that had just achieved the impossible. "We're going to build the largest weapons manufacturing operation in galactic history. We're going to produce enough quantum cascade torpedoes to destroy every Devourer swarm between here and the galactic core. And then we're going to take our galaxy back." The months that followed saw a transformation of the Refugee Alliance into something unprecedented in galactic history, a civilization dedicated entirely to warfare against an existential threat. Every habitable world in the quantum tunnel network became a manufacturing center, producing cascade torpedoes and the specialized ships needed to deliver them. Every species contributed their unique skills and knowledge to the war effort. The offensive operations that followed were methodical and devastating. Strike fleets moved through the quantum tunnels to engage devourer swarms across multiple sectors simultaneously, preventing the collective consciousness from adapting to their tactics. Each victory provided more intelligence about enemy capabilities and weaknesses, leading to improved weapons and more effective strategies. But the greatest victory was not military, but cultural. The Refugee Alliance had proven that different species could work together not just for survival, but for the liberation of their entire galaxy. The humans who had been abandoned in the Dead Zone had become the architects of galactic salvation. Standing in the observation lounge of what had once been Colony Station Meridian, Sarah watched as the combined fleet prepared for the final assault on the galactic core, where the original Devourer consciousness had first emerged. They had come a long way from 23,000 abandoned researchers struggling to survive in hostile space. They had returned at the head of a fleet, just as the story's title promised. But more than that, they had returned as the saviors of galactic civilization itself. The abandoned had become the saviors. The expendable had become essential. And humanity had finally claimed its rightful place among the stars.